Okay, big headlines about job saver Donald. Fiat Chrysler, the latest in the list in the United States. Trumpists saying, look at the jobs that Trump is creating or saving or preventing from leaving to Mexico or whatever. It turns out that once again, Donald Trump had nothing to do with new jobs that Fiat Chrysler will be creating in the United States. But before we get into that, let me remind you of how this is now becoming an ongoing trend. Carrier, the big company, manufacturing company in the U.S. that does mostly the big air conditioners, although I'm not saying that that's all they do, but they're known for the big air conditioning devices. Donald Trump bragged that he got Carrier to keep 1,000 jobs in the United States. Now, how did he do that? Well, number one, Carrier was planning on moving 2,000 jobs out of the United States. Trump got them to keep 1,000. 1,000 are still moving out of the U.S. And Trump said in exchange for this, he would give them millions of dollars in tax incentives and also go a little lighter on those 35% tariffs he had been talking about, campaigning about for companies that move jobs overseas. Now, remember that this is not economic policy. You can't just go to any company that recognizes that the business environment is just better elsewhere and give them millions of dollars. That's not economic policy. That's called crony capitalism. That's called legal bribes, etc. And what completely blew up in Trump's face about the Carrier deal was that when the CEO of United Technologies, Greg Hayes, was interviewed about the entire thing, he said, oh, we're going to take a bunch of the money that Trump and Pence are giving us, and we're going to replace employees in the U.S. with robots. So it's actually a deal that Trump made. I would be telling no one about this deal because it's a deal that will, over the long term, lead to jobs being destroyed. Then Ford Motor Company. Ford said, oh, we're actually, instead of building a factory, moving jobs rather to Mexico, we're going to put money into our existing American factory and create some jobs here. And of course, Trump is bragging, everybody bragging. And then the Ford CEO went on CNBC and said, this has nothing to do with Trump whatsoever. The reality is demand is lower for some of our cars, and we realized we don't actually need as big of a factory as what we were going to put in Mexico. So we're going to do a smaller expansion in the U.S. Trump bragging about the fact that business is just not that great for Ford, so they have to create fewer jobs here than more jobs in Mexico. Okay, that's the background. Now, Fiat, the car manufacturer, announced its plan to spend $1 billion in Ohio and Michigan. They will create 2,000 more jobs in the country. Trump tweets about it, implying that this is all sort of part of the great business environment that Trump is developing. Let's take a look at Trump's two-part tweet. Quote, it's finally happening. Fiat Chrysler just announced plans to invest $1 billion in Michigan and Ohio plants, adding 2,000 jobs. This after Ford said last week that it will expand in Michigan and the U.S. instead of building a $1 billion plant in Mexico. Thank you, Ford and Fiat Chrysler! Exclamation point, because this is very, very exciting. Unfortunately, yet another news release from Fiat tells us that it's all just smoke and mirrors from Donald Trump. This is a decision that Fiat made in 2015. This has nothing to do with Donald Trump whatsoever. The spokeswoman for Fiat was asked about Fiat's chief executive, Sergio Marchionne, and whether he had any communication with Trump or the administration at all. The answer there is no. When asked whether Trump and his politics and the business environment that's predicted to exist under Trump had any effect on Fiat's decision, the answer was no, it did not. The reality is Trump had nothing to do with this.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's even taking credit in the same way that he did in the Ford and Carrier deals. It seems like it's like this correlation doesn't equal causation type of thing.
Yeah, but still, the relating it to Ford, he took credit for Ford, the constant talking about just all these jobs that manufacturing is creating. The reality is that so far we've heard 3 stories, maybe 4. We kind of heard about the Ford story twice in 2 different ways, but let's call them 3 stories. Carrier, Ford, and Fiat. Number one, Trump isn't responsible for any of them unless you think just giving people money, which is not economic policy, is a way to actually keep jobs in a way you want to brag about. And we later learned that some of those decisions will either immediately or in the longer term, due to automation or lower demand, actually lead to fewer jobs. But that doesn't stop the Trump sycophants from going around and trying to get participation trophies for things that Trump had nothing to do with. The reality is we've got our work cut out for us during the next 4 years, because I've been getting emails, Rachel, from Trump supporters. They are convinced that Trump is responsible for all these jobs. And there's no article I can link them to that will convince them otherwise, because they've already been primed by Trump to think it's all fake news. Anything that doesn't coincide with Trump is fake news. It's going to be a real uphill battle over the next 4 years to deal with the Trumpists.
Well, I guess I worry how this is going to falsely change the perception of him to positive, and then further influence people's voting decisions. And they'll just have to wait until concrete data comes out to prove them otherwise. But how long do we have to wait for that?
Oh, I don't think the concrete data will matter. I mean, just think about it. If we think about something like unemployment, right? We had unemployment measured in the same way during Clinton, during Bush 1, during Clinton, during Bush 2, under President Obama. All of a sudden, the unemployment data that we talk about under Obama, oh, well, Obama's messing with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They're talking about the U3 when they should talk about the U6. Even if the data, Pat, supports whatever case goes against Donald Trump, the Trumpists will just say it's either fake news or the data's been doctored. It doesn't matter to them.
And even if he was able to save or create these thousands of jobs, those dwarf in comparison to the millions of jobs that Obama created during his tenure in office.
Yeah, we mentioned that yesterday. 75 straight months of creating, over 11 million jobs, I think the number was, by President Obama. So, as I've told you before, fact-checking isn't going to solve the problem. It's great that people are fact-checking, but as we saw during the campaign, fact-checking does not prevent Donald Trump from doing anything. And part of it is we've got to continue to grow progressive media, independent media. We've got a campaign going at davidpakman.com/donate, which ends at midnight on the day Donald Trump is inaugurated. I know it's going to be a very, very sad day for a lot of people. It's going to be a very scary day for a lot of people. But it may also bring good news on January 21st. We do have this campaign. I encourage you to check it out at davidpakman.com/donate. Send me your thoughts about this. I'm on Twitter at dpakman. Back after this. Today's show is brought to you by GoDaddy, where you can buy your own domain name, build a website, or use any of GoDaddy's business tools. You can save 30% at trygodaddy.com/David. GoDaddy has actually been the official host of the David Pakman Show website for many, many, many years. The 24/7 customer support has been a very good thing for us. I've called them at really odd times when we've had website issues, and they are always available. They are the largest domain registrar, and whether you have a new idea, you're an established business, you're creating a personal website, or moving your large enterprise site over to GoDaddy, they can do it all. 13 million customers. Try it and get 30% off at trygodaddy.com/David.